This is the Motivated Business Show, hosted by me, Mark Terrell, the author of Motivated, the Reluctant Leader's Guide to Building a Business that Sets You Free. In my book, I share the 7-step process to get the measure of your business. MEASURE is an acronym that stands for Mirror, Evaluate, Action, Systemize, Unify, Review, and Energize. On each episode, I'll be chatting to a business owner about how they stay motivated and how they've got the measure of their business. So without further ado, let's find out who's joining me on this episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Motivated Business Show with me, Mark Terrell. Today's guest, well, I've only just met her actually. I've only met her about 15 minutes ago when we had a sort of pre-show sort of discussion. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and so looking forward to learning more about what she's about and what her business is going to be developing from, because she's very early stages of her business. So it's always interesting to know how people got into what they're going to do and where they see themselves going to and what their vision is for the future. So before we get stuck into that, let's just remind you about a few things. Firstly, I wrote the book, as I've mentioned, and what I will be doing is mentioning the 7-step process that I talk about in the book. There's a chapter for each of the 7 steps, and also 2 other chapters which are just as important. But the 7 steps I'll be referring to after our discussion today. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast, we don't have a sponsor. Obviously, these things cost a little bit to bring to you. So if you'd like to just buy me a coffee, that actually goes a long way to keep the show on the road, as it were. And just to make it easier, there's a QR code where you can just take a photograph of that, and it'll take you straight to my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can buy me a coffee, and that contributes to the upkeep and the keeping the show on the road, as it were. And also, I want to sort of up my game, and I've shared in previous episodes, I want to get a device to help me be a bit more professional rather than using my mouse. And so if once I get to that amount, then I will tell you that I've reached it and that I'm now more techified than ever. So there we are. Anyway, without further ado, then let's bring on our guest today. Hello, Aiesha.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome along. Before we get stuck into the conversation, let's give you an opportunity to introduce yourself properly.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Aiesha, and my business is Aiesha Weste Coaching. I'm a personal development coach that specifically helps women build boundaries, learn values, and navigate toxic environments such as a relationship or in the workplace. And I also run my own podcast, which I'm about to release, called M.E.A.S.U.R.E. That releases early May. And I also do public speaking, talks and workshops, as well as being a mum and a wife.
Sounds like you've got a busy life, Aiesha. And so, as I mentioned, we've been introduced by somebody mutual, and that person is actually a motivational mapper like us. So, should we start there? Just tell us about when you came across motivational maps and why you use them in what you do.
Okay, so I actually came across motivational maps back in 2018. I was sat with our mutual friend, first time I'd ever met him, and we were talking about my interest because I've been studying astrology since I was like 15 years old. And I was telling him all about star signs, and he suddenly said, "Have you ever done a motivational map?" And I said, "No, what is that?" And he goes, "Oh, let me send you one." I thought, brilliant. And within like 3 weeks of doing a motivational map, I learned my motivations, and that's where my journey started.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think was the biggest insight that you found when you saw your map for the first time then? Because that's always interesting to find, isn't it?
Yeah, I love the stories.
Right.
I just super related to the stories. I remember reading it, and like when we had the debrief, I cried my eyes out. So I was like, oh my God, this is why things are not working out like the way I wanted them to work out. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a massive revelation for sure.
Brilliant.
How
Okay,
about you?
so
How about you? Because we actually don't know each other. So
we
like,
don't know. Learn that we're learning
when you,
about each other on a live podcast. Would you believe it? Yeah.
yeah,
So
when,
for me, it was the realization that the thing that I least wanted to do was the thing that I spent most of my time doing.
oh, that's
Uh,
interesting.
so,
That
so
is
without
so
going into too much detail, that's basically I realised, that was a light bulb moment. I thought, oh my
yeah,
god, yes. The thing is, I could do that thing. I was
yeah,
well skilled in doing it, but actually the thing was not something I wanted to do. I didn't get energy from it. So, and the
wow,
energy is. I know we're going to talk about energies, and energy
yeah,
is so important to look after and understand where you get it from. And if you're spending time doing something that zaps your energy, then you're ultimately then needing to almost to replenish from somewhere else. So that's
agreed.
the key, isn't it?
Agreed.
So you mentioned about toxic environments. So I'd
Mhm.
like to find out a little bit more about how you see a toxic environment, and where does it come from, and how could we be experiencing a toxic environment?
Yeah, so interesting. Because I actually never thought I'd end up helping people in going through toxic environments. And what I found is really it's down to us why we're in a toxic environment. And what I've now found is that there's really a level of no boundaries put in place. And the having a lack of boundaries is based upon not knowing your values. And so, what I do with my clients is we go through an exercise of understanding the values so we can build boundaries. And usually, boundaries, by the way, is because this person has probably suffered some trauma, or hasn't been validated as a child from a significant person. It could be their parents, it could have even been a teacher um, in their past. And by the way, also, I know one of my clients, it's okay if I do mention this, but we could also end up in a group of friends, and that could also backfire on us, which could then lead to not creating boundaries in the future, or creating them so wildly big that we also become isolated.
Right.
And so we can end up in toxic environments. And by the way, I mentioned the isolatedness. That's toxic in itself, because what happens is you end up becoming so very lonely because your boundaries are too high. So yeah, it's all down to boundaries. And then what I do is work backwards. So what's at the core? Is it a self-worth thing? Which 9 times out of 10, we're looking at self-worth. Okay, let's now shift the emotion around that self-worth and learn from it.
So interestingly, what I picked up there was that we can inadvertently create the environment where that can become toxic without really knowing it. It's almost like a unconscious thing. So is that something what people realise, that they've sort of had something to do with creating that environment.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to use myself as an example. Um, I'd got myself into a toxic place because I became a workaholic. And the reason I became a workaholic was because it made me feel successful about myself. Instead of just knowing that I was worthy, I relied on my work to make me feel worthy. So I became a workaholic and just didn't have any boundaries whatsoever. And I ended up burning out as a result.
Right.
And that's what happens when we have a lack of boundaries. You see, boundaries is there to protect us and to keep us safe. So we don't do things like burnout, or maybe even extreme things like self-harm, which is also can be one of the behaviors off the back of a lack of boundaries, because there's such a low self-worth. And when I let obviously you always retrospectively look back, and hindsight's always great. And knowing no doing all the work that I've done, I realize like actually the responsibility sits with me. And although I felt I was in a toxic environment, I had created that for myself. And what I find is that with my clients as well, this is something that they've created, and it's an unconscious thing because we're just so wanting to feel worthy, we want to feel loved, we want to feel validated, but and this is also something else that I teach, is that that all starts in here. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting. I don't know whether this is relevant or not, but I'm just thinking about something that happened at the weekend. So I'm a wannabe saxophonist, okay, and
Okay.
so I've not really picked up my saxophone for a long time. So so happens, you know, when these things suddenly happen out of the blue, and you think that's exactly the thing I need. And I've been thinking about what I need is an opportunity to immerse myself in something,
Okay.
in playing the saxophone, and the opportunity came up, and so I booked it, thinking this is exactly the thing I need. So I was at the weekend, I was playing my saxophone literally all weekend, and
Okay.
but you have all these conversations with fellow people that are different places on their journey. And yesterday morning, we was just sat before the session started, and I was having a chat with this guy, really nice guy. He'd been playing for a while, and he was much better than me. I mean, everyone was much better than me, to be honest. But he was telling me the story that he's only told two of his mates that he plays a saxophone. I said, "Oh,
Oh,
why's that?" He said, "Wow, I think they might have sort of, comment about, about playing the saxophone." And I said, "What possible could they say that?" And it was really, really sad. And I
mm,
thought, oh my God, this guy cannot tell his best mates that he plays a saxophone because of possible judgment. So I don't know what you think about that, but I think that obviously there's something that maybe happened in his past that that has stayed with him with regards to revealing something that was a little bit like edgy or something, and
yeah.
that's preventing him from telling his mates. I don't believe that any of his mates are actually ever going to make any judgment about playing the saxophone. I think it's something in the past.
Yeah.
What would you think about what I just said? What I told you there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, judgment starts with ourselves first. That is something, oh my goodness, I have had a massive learning in, and like, it was like a lightning bulb moment. But judgment starts with ourselves, and it is usually based on what someone significant has said to us. So, interesting example, my husband. Um, One day he said to me, Aisha, I desperately wanted to play piano. So I used to play piano, and I used to do it secretly because growing up in a Muslim household, we are not allowed to play instruments because it summons the devil. So
What?
we, yeah, I know, right?
Didn't know
Crazy.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I played piano in secret. And obviously, when I met my husband, I told him about this, and he was like, "You know, Aisha, when I was a kid, I desperately wanted to play piano, but I've never told anyone this apart from my brother, and now you." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, like what happened?" And he admittedly said to me, "My dad told me that only." It was quite homophobic as well. So it was like a mixture of
Mm,
only, homophobic in that about men, play the piano and you're a man's man.
mm,
You're meant to use your hands to like fix cars or do DIY. And he was just like, he had been told this narrative,
mm.
and just bringing it back to your friend who hasn't told his friends, most likely, I mean, is which generation is he? Is it like
Similar age
Gen?
to me.
Okay, so born in the
Middle
late
aged. Middle aged. Be kind. Be kind.
I'd be nice. But yes, he he would have been from that second generation, the generation before where men went to work and you went to the pub for a beer, and saxophone probably did look rather flamboyant. Let's put it like that, flamboyant. So
Yeah.
I wonder what type of household he had, and I wonder whether
Well,
or
the
not.
interesting thing is there is that it's like we feel threatened, don't we? So, do those people, would those people, his friends, feel threatened that he's playing the saxophone? Did his we're surmising here about his father, but maybe his father might have said something to him that we don't know. But it's that if we think about the other person that might have said something that has actually stayed with this, is it a threat that they see in that they don't now understand the person? I thought we see all these things on lots of TV programs when they say things like, "Well, I thought I knew you, but now I'm not sure," and so it's a bit like that, isn't it? It's like, well, I'm
Absolutely.
surprised. But why do you want to play that? Because I don't quite understand. And then, what's the threat to me? That's the interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and he would have worked a story in his mind about this because, someone so significant probably said something to him that anybody close to him, like really super close, who's known him since he was a kid, if his friends are, that have that sort of longevity and the relationship, but he probably has a story running unconsciously, which he has consciously become aware of, but he needs to remove the emotion that he felt probably in that moment when um when this significant person probably said something very negative about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there most likely is a story running, and it's to keep himself safe,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Um, and the reason why I think this is interesting is that you have a sort of technique where you
Yeah,
can actually go back and sort of revisit and actually deal with this, so it doesn't affect
yeah,
us in the as it might do if we don't. So do you want to
yeah.
sort of tell us a little bit about that?
So I am a timeline therapist, and timeline therapy, created by Ted James, is all about going to the past and removing emotions, which are the five main emotions, which are anger, hurt, sadness, fear, and guilt. And some people also have added ones, which, by the way, just a side note, there is a movie called Inside Out. It's a Disney one, and they explain this so beautifully, by the
Okay,
way,
right.
about emotions. They've added some like shame. That's another one that people will feel separately to guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, so what happens is emotions are stories. They really are. It's a story. And, we go back and it could actually be passed down, this emotion passed down from generations, or even a past life. Depends, it's all about where
Right.
the unconscious mind takes us. And so what we do is we work through these emotions and obviously go back to when the unconscious mind was it's very locked to us. So before the age of 36 months, which is around 3 years of age, it's very locked. And you're not going to remember. If I were to ask you, could you remember something from when you were 2 years old, you'd struggle.
Mm.
But what we do is we go into a trance and we take you back, and you let your unconscious mind just take you there and just trust it and
Mm-hmm.
just let it say what you need to say. And it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we learn from the event that happened, which has caused this emotion. And I'll give you an example, a very, very crazy example. The first time I had ever experienced timeline therapy was back in 2021 when I did my neurolinguistic programming practitioner course, and never knew I was going to be experiencing this. By the way, I've fallen into the coaching world, and we'll talk about that. But I actually did NLP to help me with my leadership for my teams at work, and to better have to have better communication and relationship building. So when I did this week long course and I end up doing timeline therapy, I went back to the moment where my grandmother, and this is crazy, my grandmother was an unmarried pregnant woman.
Right.
And my great grandfather put her into one of those homes.
Right.
Um, for unmarried mothers. And she was there for the last 6 months of her. So you can imagine, right? She's
Mm-hmm.
about to You know you're not going to walk out of this place with your baby unless you're married.
Wow.
It's devastating. So
Mm.
you can imagine, not only is there anger, but there's probably a lot of sadness too.
Mm.
Um, but what I felt was the anger from that moment, and I couldn't believe that my mind, my unconscious mind, had taken me back all the way to this story, and I watched it unraveled. And when I saw it, I mean, it was just explosive.
Mm.
And so that anger came through my mum and then into me, which is passed generationally. And
Mm.
what they've now, with a lot of research that's been done, we as women carry 7 generations of eggs.
Wow.
So this is, yes, absolutely. It is amazing. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. So what you do in your lifetime and how you feel will pass down into those eggs, right? And I just remember that so vividly. And I rang up my mum and I was like, Mum, how was grandma? Like, do you know what happened? Blah blah blah. And I mean, I did know about the story, but I never knew it like that. And mum was like, yeah, your granddad had to join the military to get married to her so that she wouldn't lose
Yeah.
the baby. And it was literally in the nick of time. So my uncle was born, and I think they get like a couple of weeks with the baby so they can breastfeed and whatnot. I think it's like maybe a week, 2 weeks, and whilst they're still finding somebody to adopt the child, so she had these 2 weeks, and they were literally just about to take him off her arms, and that's what I saw.
Wow.
And it was just and what I needed to learn from that situation was that the anger doesn't need to come down with me, and it's not my responsibility.
Yeah. So you can let
So I
go, basically.
yes.
Yeah.
And I got to learn that actually, really interesting, because the other thing that timeline therapy does is it helps you to see a perspective that is not just yours. So when I looked at the story, I could see that my grandfather, although the villain in this story felt like he was doing the best, my great grandfather, sorry, was doing the best for my grandmother.
Yeah.
She was an unmarried woman, at 21 years of age. He felt that she had her whole life ahead of her. And so, what I had to learn was that sometimes people do things because in their mind they're trying to protect. And it might seem terrifying at that moment, but it gives you a pathway to be able to look at the other perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to look back and judge, isn't it? But
Yeah.
circumstances were different, the environment was different, and just the world was a different place, wasn't it? But
Mhm.
it's quite, yeah, so enlightening what you just described there. I'm sure a lot of people will be thinking about, wow, what could would there be in my subconscious that's sort of holding me back? So,
And I
yeah, thank you for
actually
sharing that.
learned. Oh, I just thought I'd add this. I actually learned something which is so beautiful. We talk a lot about the unconscious, and if it's not clear, the universe gives you this. I was listening to a lady who does a lot of tarot readings, especially for business owners, and she said the universe is your subconscious or your unconscious. I call it the unconscious, but she said the unconscious is your universe. And of course, the unconscious mind is all about keeping you safe. So it will put you in similar situations where you feel comfortable in until you learn about that scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And what you shared there, though, is obviously you've been on quite a personal development journey, haven't you? From, trying to solve a problem with regards to your team, then
Yes.
suddenly you're now sort of delving into something that on a personal level, and now you're using that knowledge to help your clients. So it's like
That's
a very, quite a journey from where you are, from where you were to where you are today, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I've had yeah, I have got a past full of trauma. I will admit that, and I'm
Mm.
happy to admit that. It doesn't make me any better or any worse. It just means I've got a past full of trauma, and I've had to do a lot of work.
Hmm.
And I've had hypnotherapy. I've obviously experienced timeline therapy. You name it, I've probably done it. But essentially, the thing that I think is so very crucial is unlocking, and that's what I mainly do is I unlock the unconscious mind so that you can learn from it, so you can get
Yeah,
some peace.
yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. Well, time's getting on. So before we go, I just want to let you sit back for a little while, just to
Sure.
take stock of what we've been talking about. And I'm going to just summarise a little bit of what I've heard and put it into the context of the seven-step model. Now, we've talked a lot about your journey, not so much about your business, which we should talk about just before you go. But what I'm hearing is, mirror is the place where we understand ourselves, and you realise that you've got to understand yourself, and you've shared an awful lot about your journey with regards to how you've realised things, and then you've gone on this next step process where I need to do that, I need to do that, I need to do that, and I've done something very similar. I've gone to what I see as solving a problem, and then actually thinking, well, that was part of the problem, but there's actually another piece of that I need to deal with that, and I deal with that. And so when you go on that personal development journey, you then start to realise that actually there's lots of things going on. So understanding yourself, which is the mirror stage of the process, is so
Yeah.
vital. And you're very much at the early stages of your business, so understanding yourself and where you're going and where you want to take your clients is really important. And that sort of leads on to this next evaluation stage, where when you know more about yourself, you can think about, well, what is it that I want to actually change in the world? Because I think most people, when you're going to think about your business, you need to think about what difference do you make, but also think about the problem you solve. So, the problem you solve and the difference you make are sort of interlinked, but, evaluating what that is and getting that really crystal clear is really important, because it's not only important for us to make sure that our message is clear to our potential clients. It actually makes us really bought into the concept, and we can talk about it without any sort of feeling uncomfortable, because we've made the taken the steps and taken the time to evaluate it with regards to, why am I doing this? How
Yeah.
am I going to do it? And a lot of people don't understand why they do something, but once they do, then it makes all the difference to their business. And then these two sort of an interlink, actually. Action is like starting to take those actions with regards to what your business is about, and then when those actions work and they're important to you, then it's systemizing, which is again, it's more time saving than anything, but also it allows you to pass that thing on to somebody else when the time comes. And typical things for a small business owner like ourselves is passing on things like social media and all those sort of things that we didn't set our business up to do the marketing and the social media. So when we can get some help with that, then that is something that we should do, because ultimately it's not core to our business, but it's one of those things that our business needs.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of summary of what we talked about. Any comments you want to make with regards
No,
to
I
what I
love.
said?
I am actually midway through your book, which I love, by the way. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Okay.
Um, so
Thank
yeah,
you.
I do agree with a lot of what you've just said. Yeah, totally.
So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your business now then? So you've talked very much, you've been very open with sharing stuff about yourself. Just
Oh.
tell us a bit more about where you're taking your business and what difference you want to make in the world.
So interestingly, I didn't see myself as being a coach when I first stepped into this world. Back in 2018, even doing with motivational map, and then 2021 doing my neurolinguistic programming. So I never thought I'd be here, which is, I think, fantastic, really. But in terms of opening a business, I think that the very, very first thing that you should do is learn who you are, your values. And that's definitely been a massive part of my journey, is understanding who I am, what my values are, what my motivators are, and what my strengths and weaknesses are. Because I mean, although from a business perspective, this is going to be fantastic foundation for building your own business, but it's also a fantastic foundation for running your life in general. Because honestly speaking, in life, I'm not the best cleaner, so I'll hire a cleaner.
Yeah.
And in my business, I'm not the best brand strategist, so I'll hire a brand strategist. And I think that when you first open up a business, give it time and don't spend too much time like on one thing either. Like I feel almost kind of like become a jack of all trades, master of none, but a master of all kind of thing. Or is that the
Yeah.
thing?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think that you should dip your toe in all areas and understand what it is about the business. Um, and also don't get so swept away with, oh, you could be making 10K months and 6K months. Just give yourself a bit of space and compassion,
Yeah.
if that's really what you want to go do. And by the way, Builder is in my top three, but also
I was going
Searcher.
to ask that as you mentioned money.
Yeah, so Searcher and uh, Spirit. Spirit's my top one.
Okay.
Searcher is my second, and then Builder is my third, and Defender is my last, which is just hilarious. Um,
Incredible. Do you want to just, for those that don't understand the motivational map technology, just want to allude to what those top three actually mean?
Yes, so I absolutely love autonomy and to be able to make my own decisions. But what I do needs to bring me a lot of meaning, and I've got to be able to, well, builder, imagine a
Monetize it.
house. I like to be able to build things, but also make some money doing that.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. And then the defender is all about security and not taking so many risks, which is my lowest denominator, which means I take all the risks and don't care about security, which I think
There we
is kind
are.
of
Okay, so we need to wrap things up shortly, but we haven't mentioned, or you mentioned the podcast, so tell us a little bit more about that before you go.
Embrace Your Glow. It's all about teaching you how to understand yourself so you can live a life full of action, full of strategies, whether it's in your business or in your love life or just day to day. That's what I
Okay,
do.
and that'll be on podcast platforms wherever you listen to
That'll
podcasts, will
be
it?
released Spotify, and Amazon, and then you know what Apple's like. Apple makes you
They
call
always
for
take
it.
longer, but yeah, I know I've got experience of understanding that. For some reason, Apple take longer to sort of accept your requests. But anyway, we won't go into that. Anyway, thank you. We need to wrap things up. Thank you for your time,
Yeah.
Aiesha. Today, really enjoyed getting to know you because, like
Yeah.
you say, we didn't know each other beforehand. So hopefully, we can. Well, we are going to continue the conversation in some way in the future because you've invited me to be a guest on your
I
podcast.
have.
So hopefully, sometime in the future, we'll be able to do that. So looking forward to that. So turning the tables around. But just to thank you for your time today. Really enjoyed it, and have a great day. And until hopefully we meet again.
You too, and thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely fun. Love it.
There we are. So that was interesting, wasn't it? Very open, sharing lots of things there. So reach out to Aiesha. She's got quite a fledgling coaching business. I think we could describe. And so she talked about a lot of things about her journey and how she wants to help people. So get in touch with her if you want to hear more or find out more about what she's doing. And definitely check out her podcast, which is coming out. So thank you for those that joined us live. Hope you got lots of value from it. And just to remind you again about the book, if what I didn't mention at the beginning was that if you buy me 2 cups of coffee using the link to buy me a coffee, then I will send you a copy of my book. So it would be very much appreciated for the contribution for keeping the podcast going, and as a gesture of appreciation, I will send you a copy of the book as a thank you. So there we are. That's the this episode. I think it's episode 16 done and dusted. Really enjoying these shows as they sort of progress. You never know quite how these things are going to work out. But if you'd like to be a guest and you've got something that you'd like to share, then don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'll hopefully get that in the diary very soon. So thank you very much for those who joined us. And for now, we'll say cheerio, and we'll see you very soon on the next episode of the show.